Michael, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Doing good. Doing good. Hey, man, I really am kind of new to listening to you, and I'm like, I have been missing out because I just love this guy. I love your story, and I'm getting caught up on the podcast, almost there, so it's great to be here.
Well, thanks, man. I'm excited to have you on. You're the first type 1 diabetic that I found on the show, and I can't believe that I haven't had anyone with type 1 diabetes on the show because it's so important. I get so many questions about it. But before we dive into that, Michael, I want you to take the chance or take the opportunity for you to introduce yourself to my audience. Like, tell us a little bit about your background, what you did growing up that kind of led you down this path of what you do today.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a physical therapist and strength and conditioning specialist with the NSCA. So that's my whole background. Just lifting weights in high school, in college, kind of got me started down that path. And I like the therapy part of it, what I do. As far as just how I got into it was basically just not necessarily I didn't have an injury or, a lot of guys have an ACL or something that kind of gets them interested. I didn't have any rehab, but I just liked muscle function and muscle physiology, and that kind of got me sparked into it. And just kind of what I do, though, a little bit different approach. I like the finding the piece of the puzzle. I mostly work with athletes or people that have chronic injuries that aren't getting better with traditional therapy. So I kind of do a biomechanics and try to get to the cause of the injury. Like, say if you got a knee problem, more traditional therapy and approaches, they're just going to attack the knee, kind of do maybe some DMO training. Maybe you're familiar with that. Most people have heard of that. Vastus medialis is kind of. Yeah,
can you explain that for everybody? Can you explain that for everyone?
It's just kind of a common theory that's out there. Like if you have patellofemoral problems. So you got the vastus medialis, it's kind of the teardrop in your quad. And there's this kind of theory that it's out of balance and we got to strengthen that. And the VL is too strong. And, that's kind of obsolete. And, I'm kind of, instead of just looking at the knee, because by the time people have come to me, they've already had therapy. They've done some of the traditional stuff and it's got them part way down the road, but not all the way to getting them back to performance. So I'm going to look at, the knee's caught in the middle, and you got to look at the hip and the foot. That's what feeds the knee. What's coming down from the hip and ground reaction forces coming up from the foot. And so usually I kind of step away from the knee and look at those places to find out what's causing the problems there. So I really just like the biomechanics and, trying to solve that puzzle. Most of the time I can do it, not always, but that kind of keeps me interested in that.
It's good to have challenges throughout your life to keep you, motivated to learn new things and try new things, because otherwise life would be boring if you knew the answers to everything, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you need that uncertainty sometimes. Bring it back a little bit to what got you into this world. You said you lifted weights in high school, but when did you know you wanted to become a physical therapist? What were your passions? What did you foresee yourself doing before all this?
Yeah, my undergrad was in pre-med, so I was already kind of geared towards that with all the science background. And so I was just already kind of geared towards the medical field, and I really liked the sports side of it. So that's kind of what drove me there. And I wrestled in high school, I did some of that, but having type 1 diabetes, I'm sure we'll get into that. But it was hard to cut the weight. Nobody wrestles at their regular weight. I was at that point, I was like 160s, but I was wrestling at 138.
Wow.
And I just couldn't cut it, and I was getting beat out at my weight, so I didn't last very long at that. But just just having that kind of sports background just leads a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I wrestled as well, and cutting weight was the worst thing ever. I was so miserable. The methods back then. I wish I had the knowledge I knew I had now, but back then it was just like lose weight any way possible. We don't care how you do it, just do it.
Ice cubes for breakfast.
Exactly. And sweat, garage bags underneath their sweats, and just, oh man, it's just miserable. I can't believe they let us do that stuff, but it is what it is. But I think, I learned a lot of valuable lessons from wrestling, like that discipline mentality of pushing through hard times. So with type 1 diabetes, were you born with that? At what age were you diagnosed with that? Kind of tell us that story.
Yeah. I was 9 years old when I was diagnosed. Okay. And I remember I had kind of like a virus or cold infection. And then that's kind of what initiated. I didn't know it at the time, but I still remember third grade in the classroom raising my head, teacher, can I go to the bathroom? Teacher, can I get some water? Just like every 5 minutes kind of thing. And then dropping some weight. And then one morning I ate, so I remember ate some oatmeal, threw it up, went back to bed. I couldn't get out of bed. And that's when they took me in and my blood sugar was probably like 1,200 in there at that time.
Whoa.
Just insanely high.
Yeah.
And yeah, that started it.
Wow. Okay. So then what year was this? When you were 9? Sorry. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah. So you're going to date me. Well, I'm 53.
You look young, man. You look younger than me. So you're doing good.
So thanks. You're my model. So yeah.
Okay. So you're 53. Okay. So back then, once you were diagnosed, what was the protocol back then?
Yeah, it was a lot different than now because, now we have blood testing for blood sugar, and then they've got the CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors. I don't know if you've seen those. It's a little pod that goes on your arm or your back. Yeah. Kind of a game changer. Very cool. But I had to do urine testing. So I remember I had this little test tube, I had this little, I'd put a couple drops of urine in there, maybe 2 drops, 5 drops of water. I can't remember the exact ratio. Yeah. And then put this little pill in there and it reacts. I remember it bubbling up and the tube would get super hot. Yeah. You couldn't touch it, and it would change colors, and I remember blue was negative, and orange was really bad. That was like 5%. Yeah. And but the accuracy was still very inaccurate compared to now. So I could be negative on that test, and you have a renal threshold is like about 170 milligrams per deciliter now. Okay. So I could be negative and still be at 170 blood sugar, which is very elevated.
Wow. Yeah, that's really elevated.
So, so that's how we did it until they came out with the glucose monitors. So.
Exactly. Okay, so then what I'm assuming you had to be on insulin, yes. like all the time, or what was your daily, what did it look like day to day as a 9-10-year-old with type 1 diabetes back then?
Well, it's kind of a good age to get it because I didn't know any better. It's like, well, you got diabetes, you're going to have to take shots. Yeah. And it wasn't that bad. Obviously my parents were very involved, helped me out, but I had to learn to take shots. He practiced on the oranges, and I started right away. Just did 2 shots a day then. Mm-hmm. So they had kind of a shorter acting insulin and this NPH, which, it's kind of obsolete now. They don't really use that for the most part. Most people don't. Some people do. But and they would have peaks, and I'd take 2 shots a day and did that. So it wasn't too bad. I kind of went through a phase when I got a little bit older. I kind of freaked out and got scared for a while. My mom had to help me give the shot. But it really wasn't that bad. Sometimes I did miss out like on some, desserts and cakes and stuff like that.
That's what I was going to ask you. What was there any nutritional advice back then?
I really can't remember what the advice was. I know what it is now. Okay. And it really hasn't changed that much.
Did your parents change your diet at all? Do you remember having you couldn't eat, like you said you couldn't eat birthday cake or whatever?
Yeah, they took all the sugar out. Okay. Definitely took all the sugar out. And, I knew I was going to talk to you, and the doctor that diagnosed me, Dr. Richard Guthrie, Wichita, Kansas, I wasn't even sure if he was still alive. The guy saved my life. He gave me a vision for health. Yeah. And on how to control diabetes. He's very strong on controlling it. He said, if you control this disease, Michael, you will not have, he was kind of, a voice in the desert because everybody else, you have diabetes, your limbs are going to get chopped off and you're going to die. And he said, no, there's studies out, even at that time, they were in the middle of one that once the results came out that if you have tight control of your blood sugar, you don't have to have the symptoms. And it's really not diabetes is the problem. Diabetes is just the name of a condition. It's the hypers. You have hyperglycemia. Yeah. Or even hyperinsulinemia as a type 1 because a lot of people have to take so much insulin. What that does to your body. Yeah. So if I controlled my blood sugars, I wouldn't have the problems. And today, I have no symptoms. Gotcha. I've had it for 40-some years. And my favorite doctor is my eye doctor. Really? And the first time I went to see me, I just wear contacts. It's like I have to go every year to get it checked because I have diabetes. But I remember he said, when I looked at your chart before I met you, he's like, oh no, I got this 50-year-old dude, had diabetes for 40 years. It's going to be terrible because he sees it every day. And then, he sees me in the weight room, in his room, and he's like, okay, you weren't what I expected. And then, I told him my A1Cs were really controlled, and they were in the 5.2 range, which is really good. You want to understand. Excuse me. Anyway, and my eyes have no damage. And he said, Michael, a lot of people think the kidneys is where the damage first starts because you've got these really small blood vessels, the glomerulus that everything has to filter through. He goes, in your eyes, it's even smaller. And he just came out with 1 year ago, some new technology where they can actually see the periphery of your retina, which they haven't been able to do before. And he said, you have no damage in your eyes. I've got one tiny spot that's been there, a little small hemorrhage, because I don't think that's from your diabetes, but I think that was there previously. But anyway, he said, and I could see it. So you have no tissue damage thus far, and that you should be thankful for that. So I think my doctor that kind of got me started down that path.
That's awesome. So as a teenager, 20-year-old something, were there any scary moments for you, mistakes you made along the way? And then at what point did you discover, keto and how to implement this to control everything? So tell us about that part.
Yeah, well, teenage years were a little sketchy, and the first years in college, I learned one thing: alcohol and diabetes do not mix. So, because it's like a total roller coaster. And the scary thing about alcohol is it inhibits gluconeogenesis. Mm-hmm. It inhibits glucagon. So, if your blood sugar, like Drew, if your blood sugar would bottom out, your body's going to say it gets whatever, 50s. Your body's naturally going to kick in some glucagon. Yep. It's going to dump some of your glycogens and your blood sugar will come up. It's just a natural hormonal response. Mm-hmm. But alcohol inhibits that. So as a diabetic, like my blood sugar, if you drink alcohol, it's pretty much pure sugar. Your blood sugar is going to go up. Yep. But if you've got some insulin on board and it's going to peak at that time, it could come crashing back down. But the thing is, it's a bottomless pit.
Interesting.
It could just keep going, and people can get in trouble, get into comas, and have some real severe hypoglycemic reactions. That didn't happen to me, but I just had enough of that kind of lifestyle and said I need to get my life straightened out and start working on my health and my diet better. My diet was never bad, but I definitely tightened it up.
Gotcha. So if you're type 1 diabetic, pretty much do everything you can to avoid alcohol. For the most part, just be very careful with it, right?
You could have
small
some
amounts.
Wine or something. It's still, you got to know how much insulin to take to control it, but you definitely can't overconsume it by any means.
Okay, gotcha. And then were there any scary moments for you at any point in time, like in your 20s, where you're trying to push the limits a little bit, or no? Like with working out or anything like that?
No real scary moments. I mean, you still, with working out though, you still sometimes you get some lows. Yeah. And you get hypoglycemic, you bottom out, and you're done. Like, I'm done for that. That's probably the only frustrating thing I have. If I work out and it goes low, then it takes me about 20 minutes to recover, and by then it's, my workout window's done, and I got to come back another time.
Tell us about ketoacidosis, because here's the thing for some people that are listening. They think ketosis is ketoacidosis, and that's why they freak out. Ketosis is really bad for you. You could die. All these things. Tell us about, type 1 diabetics having to be careful with ketoacidosis, what it is, and what happens in the body, if that's okay.
Yeah, ketoacidosis is a severe condition, and you cannot get there by eating coconut oil. So, and I'm telling you, some people, they still have this little fear that if my ketones get too high, then I could still, from nutritional ketosis, go into ketoacidosis, and you can't, because it's usually a pathological condition that's instigated by an infection, and then your electrolytes can have some problems, and usually it's like sepsis or something very severe that causes it. Yeah. My wife is a certified diabetes educator. She sees these patients in acute care, and it can happen to type 2s as well. She'll see type 2s in DKA. But they're sick, they've got like pneumonia or sepsis, or they've got an open wound. Yeah. They've had hyperglycemia, 600 blood sugars. They get an open wound and it's infected. And the reason they come in is they've kind of ignored the wound, but they're in DKA because of the infection. And that's usually what drives it. So you cannot get into DKA from just being in nutritional ketosis, because the levels are so different. Like somebody that's in, we would consider a high ketone level of whatever, 4.0, 7, something like that. That's pretty high. Yeah. These are in the 20s, 25, wow. Which you can't get there, like I said, just by fasting and doing some MCTs or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I want to make really clear to some people. I've seen some people get to the 5, 6, or 7 range, after a long fast. It's really hard to get up there. The highest I've ever been is 2.5, and that was with a ketone ester. And, I rarely get above that. So to get into the 20s, it's almost like you were saying, impossible through nutritional ketosis or even ketone supplementation. Yeah. But with ketoacidosis, what happens is your ketones rise to those very high unsafe levels, but at the same time, your glucose is on the rise as well. Because normally what happens when you're in ketosis, your ketones will go up, glucose go down, right?
Yes, it's an inverse relationship.
Yeah, or vice versa. If you eat a ton of carbs, your glucose goes up, your ketones go down. Yes. Right? Okay. Yeah. But with ketoacidosis, they're both at very high unsafe levels, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. And there are some type 1s that they just don't take their insulin, which I don't understand that, but they haven't taken it.
Okay.
And for like a couple days, and then they go into diabetic ketoacidosis.
Yeah. So
again, they're severely high blood sugars, like 600, 700, 800.
Wow.
And it kicks them into that.
Interesting.
And the crazy thing is, Drew, is my wife, it works in a hospital in this cute setting, and she'll see these people. It's like a revolving door. They'll be DKA, and they'll come back 2 months later. Same thing. Because they didn't take their insulin, or maybe there's some drug use, or something that drives that. So it's just kind of a sad deal.
Yeah. So, I just want to make sure your average person out there isn't freaking out thinking if I do keto, I might get into ketoacidosis, even if you're type 2 or type 1. But if you're on top of things, you're monitoring things, you're generally healthy, you should be okay. Right?
Yes. And even for me as a type 1, I'm not worried about ketoacidosis.
Yeah.
Drinking MCTs, and unless I let my blood sugar, I don't take my insulin, then I'm definitely, and that, again, that's not from my nutrition. That's from poor control of diabetes.
Yeah. So tell us about your transition into keto. Like, when did you discover it? Did you do some research? Were you kind of skeptical? Were you nervous? Like, when did that happen? At what point in time of your life? And what was your thought process about that?
Well, I've been low carb for like 20 some years.
Okay.
Because I think if you really want to control your diabetes, the logical conclusion is you cannot do carbohydrates.
Yeah.
It's just too hard to control it. The amount of insulin you have to take with carbohydrates compared to what I take now is like 400% more than what I would have to take without eating carbs. So it's just so much easier, just more consistent, less roller coaster. I don't have the highs, I don't have the lows, I don't have these fluctuations. So I've been low carb for a long time, and just training, knowing low carb, I'm going to be leaner and stuff. And really what drove me to going into the ketogenic diet was 2 years ago. And it really wasn't diabetes. I just wanted to see if I could lean out some more without starving, because I've had to starve myself before to do it.
Yeah.
And, heard about some bodybuilders doing it. So that's kind of what got me started down that path. But as a result of it, my diabetes the control of it is just tightened up even more. Just less fluctuations, even more consistent blood sugars.
Was your approach with it different than your traditional ketogenic diet of like 70-25-5 because you have more muscle mass, you're lifting heavier weights? Did you do higher protein at first, or kind of what was your protocol with keto when you got into it?
Yeah, I just kind of Googled some stuff and guessed my way. Had the keto flu, didn't have enough electrolytes or magnesium, so it was torture the first couple weeks.
Gotcha.
But I started leaning up pretty quick.
Okay.
And I think I was doing kind of more of like an 80-20, 80% fat and 20% protein.
Okay.
And then since then I've changed that. I've increased my protein more because I need it for training, and that's really helped. I'll tell you just a quick story of where as with diabetes, as I saw the difference that once I did get adapted after being a couple months.
Yeah.
Was every summer our church has this like sports camp that we do.
Yeah.
And I usually help with the soccer component, and it's in the evenings. And when I usually work out really early, like at 4 a.m. And sometimes in the afternoon, I may do a little bit of cardio if I've been driving or something just to get moving. But it's always been hard for me, Drew, to exercise in the evenings because it's after my dinner.
Same here.
I've had my insulin, and I've got these variables. I've got my insulin, I've got the food, and I've got the exercise.
Yeah.
And it's hard to juggle those sometimes. And I usually don't exercise in the evening, so I'm fine. But with this camp, it was always a little bit challenging for me. In previous years, I would either, okay, so tonight am I going to be in soccer? Are we going to be scrimmaging? If I'm scrimmaging, I'm going to be running like crazy. I'm going to have to lower my insulin, because if I don't, I'm going to be running. I'm going to have a low blood sugar, and they're going to, carry me out on a mat. But if I'm just standing around, I'm going to have to take my, and I never knew exactly what we were going to do. So it was a guessing game, and sometimes I got it and sometimes I didn't. Like sometimes my blood sugar would be like 50, 45, and I'd have to sit down and get a little snack. Or my blood sugar, I'd come home and it'd be 250 because I tried to compensate and I overcompensated.
Yeah.
So anyway, once I kind of adapted and we had our camp, and I just took my normal amount of insulin for my meal. I take like at that point I was taking 2 units of this Novolog. It's a short-acting insulin. And I would have, I can't remember how many grams of protein I was doing, maybe 50 grams for a meal.
Yep.
Anyway, took my normal amount, went out and ran like crazy, did just insane stuff.
Yeah.
I came back and went, oh, my blood sugar, I didn't drop out. So the next night, it was just the opposite. We just kind of did some coaching, some dribbling stuff, kicking.
Yeah.
Went through some material and didn't do anything. I took the same amount of insulin, and I came back, and my blood sugar was normal.
Wow.
So, I think the theory that, we can have this fat burner and sugar burner, and, we know it's not either or, it's both and. Mm-hmm. But obviously, we burn fats more efficiently.
Yeah.
But I don't burn sugar the same. I don't worry about burning all my blood sugar off when I'm exercising because I use fats now.
Yeah.
In a different way than I did before. Obviously, I use both, and I still use the glucose there, and exercise does affect it, but it's not like it was before. So I have less low blood sugars. I have more of a cushion.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most attractive things to the ketogenic diet for a diabetic. And I've seen some, type 1 groups that kind of, poo-poo the keto thing and maybe overreact to it, but I don't know if they've ever been adapted to it and seen the benefits of that.
Gotcha.
Just by adding a little extra oil or fat to my meals, it can make a big difference.
Interesting. Did you talk to your doctor when you switched to strict keto? And if so, what was his thoughts or advice?
Yeah. Well, I switched doctors.
Okay, gotcha.
I found a doctor. I see a functional medicine doctor. So, and I found a doctor that's pretty much just going to leave me alone. And,
okay.
Because I know how to manage this. I've got it down to a science. And most of them now, they just say, well, just keep doing what you're doing. Your A1Cs are good. And they're not going to mess with it because they know I've got it. So, but I do have a story for you.
Sure.
It just happened 2 days ago. So it's kind of perfect timing. So 2 days ago, Drew, I went and saw a registered dietitian at an endocrinology clinic. And man, I should have known better. I should have known. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, this lady was like a anti-low carb, anti-keto Nazi in a skirt.
Okay.
So, and I didn't go there for myself. My daughter, I have a 12-year-old daughter. And a couple years ago, we noticed she kind of stopped growing. She wasn't growing. So we went to her regular pediatrician, and she was still on the growth curve, but on the bottom end of it. Mm-hmm. She wasn't too worried. I was worried. It's like, well, let's get something going here, and finally she fell off the curve.
Okay.
And so got all this blood work done, got all the hormones, everything tested good.
Yeah.
Then we had to go to an endocrinologist and get some more tests. And he did the HGH, human growth hormone test, and the IGF-1.
Okay.
And sure enough, she was low. So we got her started on HGH November 2017.
Okay.
And man, it has made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So started growing again, but we really had to monitor her calories to make sure she gets enough.
Okay.
I mean, she's pretty, she's an athlete. She's really fit. She's got some muscles. I wish I had her legs, but
yeah.
Anyway, so this was just kind of a standard follow-up visit with their registered dietitian at the endocrinologist. So, and the reason my goal was just to have somebody, a professional, to kind of back my wife and I up to say, the doctor says you need this many calories. The nutritionist says you need this many calories because this is a challenge to make sure she gets enough to keep growing. I mean, I don't know if you have some, kids and girls, sometimes they just eat like Jell-O or something and it's just not enough. So anyway, so I went to see her, and so first of all, she kind of looks over things. We write down what she's been eating the last few days, take it in. And first thing she says, well, you're not getting enough carbs. And we don't have her on a ketogenic diet. Yep. She eats a higher fat, and we make sure she eats good carbs, no grains, no sugar. She doesn't eat that stuff. She's totally health oriented. Mm-hmm. But like sweet potatoes, fruit, and that kind of thing. Yeah. Anyway, okay, here's what she says. You need to have cookies and milk every night for a snack.
Oh my gosh.
So she kind of goes through some of her stuff, and then here's the part where I was shocked. Then she starts asking me questions. Oh, so tell me. So she works in a clinic. Endocrinologist. She works with a lot of type 1 diabetic kids. So she asked me, how much insulin do you take? Well, tell me about your diet. So I told her I do, low carb and higher fat. I kind of at that point already think I better not say keto because it's going to be bad.
It's like a cuss word or something.
So, and then she pretty much what she said is like, well, I think you need to model to her a normal diet as a father.
Wow.
And you need to eat since she's not eating these like cookies and stuff, you need to eat some cookies. And she looked at my insulin. You could do it if you take this much insulin. And she said, what are your thoughts about that? And Drew, I was in shock. I was so taken back. All the things that I wanted to say, that I should have said, that I could have said, that I didn't say. I didn't think about it till afterwards. I don't know if you ever have that. I'm just playing that conversation over in my mind. She said, well, what do you think about that? And I just said, well, it's kind of like, it's almost like against my religion, and I couldn't really think of, I had to say smart, but at least I said something coherent. I said, sugar it's contraindicated for a diabetic. Yeah. So it goes against everything I've been trained. Yeah. And my physician that trained me in this, he would not go for that. Yeah. So she spent the next, 30 minutes trying to convince me that I need to do it. I'm not a good role model for my daughter. Wow. And it was, at least it gave me some good material to talk about. But, I think about, that's probably pretty typical. I think about all the type 1 kids that she instructs and what kind of diet is she giving them? How many carbohydrates? I mean, it's okay. I agree. As a child, if you have a piece of cake at a birthday, then that's fine. We still have to have a little bit of balance with it, but to recommend it every day for a child, and then for a type 1 diabetic to eat sugar. And I said, well, how much insulin am I going to take for that? How am I going to control that? What if I take too much and I bottom out? Yeah. She doesn't have diabetes. She doesn't have to worry about it. Yeah. So, and I think that's pretty standard care that's in a lot of medical clinics. And that's unless you go to like, somebody that's in our space or in the functional medicine or people that really understand what we're doing.
And that's what the scary thing is that your average person out there who's not as educated, who doesn't have a background in this and doesn't take the time to research it, they don't know as much as this person. So it's like, well, this person's smarter than me. They must know what they're talking about, so I better listen to them. And that's how a lot of people have fallen into a lot of traps throughout the years since the 70s and 80s of bad nutritional advice. And look where it's gotten us. And so I think now with how much information is readily available to people, like for example, this podcast, where people can instantly download and listen and hear a different perspective, is really powerful, because then they can go to their doctor and be like, hey, I was listening to this doctor on this podcast or whatever who was talking about keto for type 1 diabetes, and I think I'm going to do this. I did the research and I've done it, and here's my numbers, here's my blood work. What do you think? Yes. And then they're like, well, I was taught differently, but you can't argue with numbers and results. And so I think that's where hopefully the people can take the power back by gaining that knowledge, doing their homework, doing their research to find out what's optimal for them, rather than just listening to a registered dietitian, pound on them for, telling them to eat cookies every night.
Yeah, and that's where I love what you're doing, Drew. I mean, it's so important what you're doing, and just keep spreading that word, and it can make a difference, because it wasn't, what she said was not based on literature. It wasn't based on data. It was like IMO. This is my own opinion. It's like, let's see, you got some data to back this up. And, I didn't really go there because it was, my daughter was there. She had an intern there. And, but I hear you. This stuff like what you're doing can make a huge difference.
So what advice would you give? Because I'm going to blast this out to a lot of people and make sure that type 1 diabetics listen to this, that you can do keto, you can be successful with type 1 diabetes on the ketogenic diet. And here's a perfect example. What advice would you give to other type 1 diabetics that are kind of maybe skeptical, or maybe their doctor or dietitian is telling them something different? What's some hope or advice you can give them?
Well, like I said earlier, the good thing about diabetes is you can control it. Again, it's just a label. It's your blood sugars that make a difference. And if you want to have good control of your blood sugars, the easiest way to do it is to avoid carbohydrates. So just for example, like I told you, so my breakfast this morning, I had 4 ounces of salmon, had a little bit of lettuce. I had another 7.5 ounces of roast beef and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So I do measure out my protein, because that is how I measure how much insulin I take. Because if I change my protein, I have to change my insulin. But I took 3 units of insulin, 3 units of a short. So, some people freak out about this gluconeogen. It's like, oh, what if I went from, say I went from 11 ounces to 16 ounces. I would have to increase my insulin, but maybe 2 more units is all. So let's put this in perspective. If I ate some carbs with that, say I ate toast, say I ate some pancakes, typical breakfast, I ate like 3 pancakes with it, which I could probably eat 5 pancakes, and those are nothing. I would have to take probably from 3 units, I'd probably have to take 20 units of insulin.
Wow.
If not more.
Man, that's crazy.
and that's what carbohydrates do. That's what they require. And then you're guessing, and then you have more of a chance of going from a high back down to a low. You're going to have more of a roller coaster effect. So just remove the carbohydrates, and you'll have a lot easier time controlling your blood sugars and less problems, less incidence of having all these comorbidities that come with diabetes. Kidney failure, eye problems, neuropathy, retinopathy, all that kind of stuff. So
that's awesome.
I mean, we have so much to offer. I mean, you heard all the stories. I know you've had physicians on that they can reverse type 2 diabetes. They're reversing it off their meds, off insulin. It's so encouraging. So just decreasing your insulin right there can make a big difference for your life.
What does the rest of your day look like? You mentioned breakfast. Can you paint a picture for the rest of your day?
Okay, yeah. So here's kind of a challenge with type 1 diabetes. I kind of get in ruts. So I just recently switched from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day.
Okay.
A lot of people on this keto thing, they do 1 or 2. They do intermittent fasting. You don't have to eat as much as you did before. And I've kind of felt that for a long time, but I guess I was a little scared of change.
Yeah.
Because I have my system, and it worked. and I call it the TETs, trial and error titration. It's going to be trial and error. I'm going to have some high blood sugars, and I'm going to have some lows. And it takes a little bit of stepping over a hump to actually make yourself do it. But it's like, I need to lean up a little bit more. I want to feel better. I don't need that extra meal. I'm going to give it a shot. So I'm just a month into it, and I've had to, do some changes. It's taken a lot of work just to get my insulin right, and I'm still kind of tweaking the protein. Still trying to figure out the right amount where I'm not doing too much or doing too little. First, I was doing too little, way too little. I was like, no energy, working out. I was like, oh man, I got to change this up.
Okay.
So 2 meals. So I work out early, get up at like 3:30. I know it's crazy, but I have to test my blood sugar first thing. Yep. I take a couple of units. Do you have a question?
Do I?
Okay.
No, keep going about your day.
So take a couple of units of insulin before I work out, and you're thinking, okay, I work out fasted. I'm not going to eat at 3:30 in the morning. I'm not hungry. But I still have to take insulin because, you got that dawn phenomenon. I'm starting to break down some glycogens. I'm fasted. I need that. It's just your body reacts that way. So I have to have some insulin on board even before I work out, even before I exercise. Because if I don't, I can find out the hard way. If I don't take any, I'll come back from my workout and my blood sugar will be, like I said, 250. So I have to take a little bit. Anyway, do my workout, come home, I do my breakfast about 6 o'clock, and then go about my day, and then just have a regular dinner. And I test my blood sugar throughout the day, probably, just to make sure it's on. I check it an hour after I eat, a couple hours after I eat, check in the middle of the day just to make sure it's on, especially when I'm changing my diet up. Because I want to make sure it's on, because sometimes it will go a little bit high, and if it does, I'll take a adjustment amount of insulin, like 1 or 2 units, to bring it back down, and then back for dinner and do it again.
What's a dinner look like for you?
Okay, so typically I've kind of been going a little bit carnivore lately.
Yeah.
I do usually some hamburger or some steak. Sometimes my wife will cook a chicken dish, but again, I try to measure it out so I get the same amount.
Okay.
And lately I've been doing about 12 ounces of, just say like last night was hamburger. I did 12 ounces of hamburger. Okay. And then I put just it was a little bit dried out. So, some of that, some of the grass-fed roast beef just is a little dried out.
Yep.
I put a little bit of butter on it.
So no snacks during the day? No snacks?
No snacks. I've been trying to go with this 2 meals. Nice. I don't really need them. I'm not hungry for them. I don't need them. Previously on diabetes, when I was growing up and had these different kinds of insulin on board, you had to do a snack every couple hours because your insulin peaking, and you had to have a snack. And it is kind of hard to break out of that mentality. It's taken a while to break out of that snack mentality, because if you didn't have a snack and your insulin peaks, then you're going to have a low blood sugar. So I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Okay. Well, that's good. I think it's really important to kind of paint that picture for people that maybe want to model themselves a little bit after you once they get fat adapted, or, do the research just to find what works for them. Because I think a lot of people might be scared. Even for me, going from 6-7 meals a day, even though I wasn't a diabetic, was still kind of scary for me. I'm like, man, I'm going to go from that to 2 meals a day. Like, that seems, how am I going to maintain my muscle mass? How am I going to have energy? You know? But It's interesting, your body adapts and adjusts, and even for type 1 diabetics, it can work as well. Mike, I really just want to say thank you. I really appreciate your story. I think it's a hope for those people out there that do have type 1 diabetes, that maybe are kind of, you know, in a rut where they're like, I'm stuck with this. It's always going to be miserable. And but anyways, the last question I had for you before we finish up, and I almost forgot to ask this, was about a CGM. Do you have a CGM in your body that you can read on an app, or are you using any of that technology now?
No, I don't. And I know I should.
So you just prick yourself.
I just prick my finger, got my stuff right
so
here.
You're just used to it. Yeah.
Old school, but it really is a game changer, and I need to do one. Okay. It's mostly just total vanity, aesthetic purpose. I don't want that thing sticking out of my arm when I'm at the gym. Really, that's it. That's the only reason.
I know
there's a PhD. I can't remember what university she's at. I think her daughter has diabetes, and she's working on like a Band-Aid one. So those are going to be out before too long. I'll be the first one to sign up for that.
There we go.
They do make a big difference for people, because you got it right there. It's on your phone. Every 5 minutes you can check it. You
can see exactly, like, to the second, like, when you eat, what you eat, and how it's affecting your blood sugars, you know. I think that's so cool, and I think it's great, that kind of data, that feedback, like, almost instantly without having to prick your finger. Where can people find you online, your website, social media accounts, and any information like that we'll put in the show notes?
Yeah, it's my website's 3dperformancesystems.com. It's the number 3, 3D Performance Systems. Everything's on there. So, yeah, Drew, it's been
And where are you located? Where are you located?
I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. So anybody that's listening from Oklahoma, Tulsa area, reach out to Michael. Next time you're in Utah, you have to let me know.
Okay, yeah, man.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and all the links will be in the show notes. And keep doing what you're doing, Michael. You're looking awesome, man. So,
all right.
Okay. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.